Welcome to this panel session 3, which is about decarbonizing mineral metals production. Right. So first of all, let me start by thanking FMF for the invitation. It's an absolute pleasure to be here and sharing this session with you, my distinguished colleagues here. My name is Victor Rodriguez. I'm the head of consulting for the EMEA region at CRU. And here I have a dream team, a dream team of experts, great experience, diverse experience, and I think this will make our session quite interesting. Let me introduce the panel. So Joe Lombard, you're a vice chairman at Hatch, Martin Feth, managing director and partner at BCG. Joan Bate, well, you've just been here, so you're a regular COO at IDC. And finally, last but not least, Professor Bassam Dali, King Abdullah University of Science and Technology. So what we will discuss here is decarbonizing the production of mineral and metals. And I think it's a big topic, right? So one thing for sure, we will not solve that in 30 minutes here. But what we will try to do, perhaps, is to bring some good insights. I'm sure the panel here will help with that. And trying to address the key issues we have in this space from different perspectives of technology, the corporate strategy, financing. So trying to see which are these key issues in each of the areas, benefiting from the experience and the talent of this panel. I trust that there will be some good insights after this discussion, and hopefully we can turn this talk into action. That's the spirit of the forum. So this is the introduction to the panel, and let's just get started if that's fine. So I will start with Martin, and I think no one here will argue against the fact that it's important to decarbonize the industry. But do you think that companies really understand what's the cost and the value of decarbonization today, in your view?
So, first of all, great to be here. Thanks for the invitation, Victor. Look, I would take a step back and say, over the past couple of years, we've almost seen a race for commitments, right? So mining companies have put out their external decarbonization commitments, while at the same time trying to work through their decarbonization roadmaps. Right? And in doing so, they had to deal with a lot of uncertainty on technical feasibility, on commercial viability, but also organizational complexity, right? Because some of your initiatives would be on headquarter level, some on BU level, some of asset level. And so I would say, unsurprisingly, when we now work with mining companies on decarbonization, we feel that there's a lot of bits and pieces, but rarely we have the full puzzle in place, right? So I think that's certainly an area where companies can double down, is kind of creating that full transparency on decarbonization pathways to make sure that they find the cost-optimal decarbonization pathway, right? We see that mining companies invest significant money, millions, billions, in decarbonization. So making sure to have the right path is actually super important also from a financial point of view. That's on the cost side. I would say on the value side, it's a bit more on the emerging side. There's typically 3 big buckets of value when we talk decarbonization, right? You have your direct financial impact. Think about energy efficiency measures, renewable energy, where there's a clear business case to be made. Second, there's the indirect value, right? Access to capital, access to talent, maintaining your license to operate, much more difficult to quantify. And then last but not least, there's what I would call the kind of commercial value. So trying to launch low carbon product lines, trying to commercialize technologies that you develop on your own operations for decarbonization and trying to commercialize them externally. And I would say most companies have a solid handle on that first block of direct financial value, right? Oftentimes very limited insight into that indirect block, although it can be quite sizable, right? Just think about the license to operate discussion. And then I would say only the industry leaders are really thinking through commercializing their decarbonization efforts. And so it's certainly, we are on the journey, but I think companies can still double down in fully understanding the cost and the value to then also gain competitive advantage from it.
That's quite good, quite interesting. You touch upon very, very good topics, and we'll come back later. And I was thinking maybe from the financial community perspective, Joan, you have more experience. What do you think that today investors are considering? Which are the key criteria when looking at investment in the mining and metals sector?
So investors are very much looking for, or there's concerns around stranded assets. So what is the demand going to be in the future? So how do we ensure that the project is bankable? We spoke to bankable on the previous panel as well. What is the demand? What is the need? What is the volume that is available? What's currently being traded? I think we know that the minerals need to increase tenfold to meet the demand, more than tenfold, to meet the demands of the manufacturing of green products potential. So how do we plan for the volume to actually meet that? Because it's not just about mining for all of that. I think we also need to be thinking about the recycling. So it's about metals extraction as opposed to mining. And I think that understanding that ecosystem for investment, I think over the next 10 years, we probably find to be looking at country risks. So where is the mine located? What is the country risk? What is the financial premium of that? What is the ability to extract? How can we structure the project? Critically investing with key partners. So a country like Saudi Arabia, with the partners that are looking at mining development here, very easy to make those investment decisions. But we look at certain of the minerals that are only available in Africa, it makes those decisions a lot more difficult to invest. Western companies are needing to compete very actively with the Chinese and Indian market, who are looking to secure offtake. So in many instances, the government support is to ensure that there is offtake that can be accessed for the country. So from a financial decision perspective, ESG is a key consideration. We often think about the E part of the decision. Increasingly, S&G is becoming important. How do we ensure that we are dealing with ethical business partners, that there's ethical business practices? And I think particularly from a development organization perspective, it really is about ensuring that the social considerations are in place. We often focus too strongly on the E, and particularly in mining development, we have to be thinking about the long-term sustainability of communities. We can't develop mining over the next 25 years the way we've done it over the last 25 years. We have to be thinking about inclusion, we have to be thinking about communities and what really is going to sustain those communities once mining moves on. So I do think the decisions around minerals of the future is greater than just the green opportunity. It really is about bringing the S and the G into the decision making as well.
Good. I think that it's been the case for the last few years. It's going to be more and more important as we move into more demanding end-use sector as well. And I think perhaps this leads us to the next point of discussion. Okay, we need to finance all these projects, but we also need to make this happen, Joe, right? So we need to extract and produce. So in your view, which are the technology challenges that we have here and how we can accelerate, perhaps looking at long-hanging fruit, maybe, which are the technologies that today can help accelerate decarbonization in the mining and metals industry?
Well, decarbonization starts with having energy available. There's no silver bullet there. This very complex problem, to be quite honest, and so there are multiple options that have to be developed in a very highly customized fashion. I would want to emphasize the point, and I'm not going to dwell on it, that we do need, if we want to replace the carbon, we need to replace it with other electrons, other sources of energy. So whatever we do in decarbonization will demand much more electricity. So let's park that there for the moment. And then a hydrogen economy, all of those economies come in. Renewable energy will become more and more important in the future. You know, wind, water, sun, nuclear should be much more important for us as we move forward. Nuclear is very green energy, so SMR, small modular reactors, I think those are technologies that we need to continue to explore and position and place in many of our industries. The mining industry is very ripe. We have multiple clients all around the world, each and every one of them seriously committed and spending money on decarbonization. of course, it's a process that you have to go through. You can't change from one day to the next day. So we are with them on that journey. There are technologies that are available in, process efficiency improvements. There, as an example, on electrification of mines. I think that's a major item. Just to be quite pragmatic about it, there we are currently in commissioning the world's first full-scale, very deep underground mine that was designed from day one to only accept electric equipment, electric vehicles, electric equipment, fully automated, automated and electrified. So this is very exciting that the company made that decision, a very brave decision, 15 years ago when the equipment wasn't yet available. So I think we also need, as an industry and as a world, need to have the courage to sometimes take these bold decisions if we want to make change. It's not, if you don't take bold decisions, you're not going to make change. So that's, I think, a great example. There are other examples too, where where our clients are spending and investing money. The steel industry has got huge potential. There are technologies available by which you can replace bake furnaces. We, for example, have a technology called CRISP that you can replace, not bake furnace, blast furnaces, sorry. In the steel making process, of course, you have to use electric energy, but that's the balance we have to strike. And Rome wasn't built in one day, and this is a journey that we are all on, and we will continue to be on. I mean, I can go on forever, and so I will kind of stop here. But suffice to say that there are multiple technologies that we implement, that we develop as an industry, as an organization around the globe. The discussions that we're having. A couple of years ago, we sat in our organization and we were asking ourselves the question, so what do our clients think about decarbonization? And my answer was, well, the CEOs are definitely aware of it. And they got a few people sitting there in a corner of the head office writing little reports. Yeah. And so, yeah, they're aware of it, but we don't see any practical traction on the projects nor in operations. But in the last couple of years, that has changed so much. And being here at this conference is clear also an indication that we as a world, we as an industry have moved on. We are moving on. We have reached now critical mass as far as I'm concerned. The technologies are there. Some are in development, some are moving forward, some are mature, some are, emerging. We have multiple technologies that we're working on that will assist in the decarbonization of this world.
Thank you. And I took some notes. First, nuclear, I have a colleague that is an absolute, believer, so he will be very pleased to listen to that, and I personally support that. And second, the bold decision, and maybe we can back that.
And there's one more, the recycling. I just want to add up to what you were saying. Recycling is something that even we as a mining industry should it's part of the plan. It's part of the solution as well, and we should do more of it. I like to tell little stories. One little story I want to tell. So we have a client in Europe. They recycle printed circuit boards. So they've got mountains of scrap printed circuit boards, and from that every year they extract, amongst others, 50 tons of gold.
Wow!
Just those are the little pin on the connectors that you have. It all adds up, and that's among copper and all kinds of other things. But just to show that example, so what used to be scrap and garbage is a valuable commodity. That's the point I want to make. Batteries recycling is another big example.
Very good. And I think so far we have been taking maybe a global approach, but Bassam, you are based here, you're a professor, you look at the reality of the kingdom. So what do you think, in your view, which are the options to decarbonize the local industry here in Saudi Arabia? What are those alternatives that you see?
Yeah, thank you. Saudi Arabia has a lot of advantages and disadvantages. Advantages is that many of the industries, mineral industry, is relatively new. So they have used a lot of new technologies. So they use RDI. Most cement companies do heat recovery. So the technology is relatively new. And of course, if anybody invested so much in their capex, then they don't want to try and change it today. It becomes really more expensive. The other advantage is that it has basically all forms of energy that we know, and it's very, very cheap. So if it wants, it actually is able to decarbonize as time comes by. So it's this and that. I think where the elephant in the room is, and these type of conferences where Saudi Arabia want to make this the third pillar of industry, in that there's an opportunity that with a greenfield, that they make him enabled for decarbonization in the future. So if we make these new plants able to either be electrified or be able to take renewable fuels in the future, then that's an opportunity that when an F becomes viable, they have the opportunity to do it. And not many people there's a lot of well-established markets, Australia, New Zealand, in Canada and lots of other places where it's been there for a lot of years. It's really not new fields. But where I think the low-hanging fruits is in the circularity that you talked about in recycling. In fact, the Saudi government has adopted what's called CCE, Circular Carbon Economy. They have established CERC, this is the recycling company, and that actually is going to all help in the decarbonization. Another thing, what's happening in here, the switching from heavy fuel oil to natural gas. And that's a major reduction in CO2 intensity that will make an impact as time comes by. So we're talking about hydrogen, I think it's great, but it's not going to happen anytime soon. I think it's going to be transitional. There's a lot of current processes where we could do blending. When it's available, when it's viable, we should be added. Sometimes up to 20% is going to be reduce the amounts that we do. And really the major contributor here in Saudi Arabia in the mineral side is cement. I know after this session there's another one. They are doing some clinker substitution where instead of using limestone, they use clay. That can make a massive reduction in CO2 emission. They're trying to use RDF, so alternative fuels, to be able to reduce the reliance on heavy fuel oil, and also to use natural gas instead of heavy fuel oil. In terms of steel, that's something we could touch on later, but it's mostly RDI, so it's relatively efficient. Switching from syngas to hydrogen is not too difficult. It requires investment. But so there's a lot of options, I think, but currently the market drivers are still weak, in my view.
Good. Yeah. Speaking about cement, last night I learned that there's 5 cement plants in NEOM, one next to the other. So the size of the projects that are coming here in this country is so massive that would be good to decarbonize just a tiny bit cement industry.
Can I add a small thing that by 2030, the Real Estate Institute says that Saudi Arabia will be the largest construction site in history. So can we decarbonize between 23 and 2030? We need some drastic action. It's a massive, massive investment in construction that requires steel and cement. So I think action will make a difference, even small action.
Yes, absolutely agree. Perhaps going back to what we were discussing initially, Martin, about organizations. At company level, what do you think are the options that companies have to accelerate their commitments? So many companies, different industries, they have commitments. We are looking at now mining and metals. So what are the practical steps they can take to accelerate this transition?
Yeah, look, excellent question. In BCG, we actually monitor quite closely how industrial goods companies perform on their emission reduction targets, right? And it's not a big surprise that most companies, so the vast majority, are at the moment not reducing emissions fast enough to meet their decarbonization target that's publicly committed, right? So we actually asked ourselves exactly that question, right? Well, I mean, why is that, and what can be done differently? And we've conducted a study with 20 companies, interviewed more than 50 of their managers to kind of understand what are those challenges and how can you get around them. And the answer is simple and difficult in the same thing, right? So first it's data, then it's people, and then it's processes. So those were the things that clearly came out on the data side. It's oftentimes a lack of available high-quality emissions data, right? That you have, yes, a lot of companies have a solid baseline by now, but measuring emissions on an ongoing basis in a high-quality way, still difficult, right? Second one, on the people side, I think sustainability, decarbonization are still relatively new topics. So you do have some know-how, some skill gaps that need to be filled. And on the process side, I think, John, you alluded to it, oftentimes the decarbonization and sustainability strategies have been defined on headquarter, right? But they have not properly been cascaded into the entire organization. And so those are the three big challenges. Now, in terms of a couple of best practices that we've learned throughout those interviews, on the data side, I mean, one is certainly automate as much as possible, right? Take the burden of data collection away from the operational teams that are supposed to produce ore, right? And try to automate data collection. The other one is more organizational. It's reassigning responsibility from the sustainability team to the CFO department. CFOs typically have a strong track record of data collection, validation, and so that solved the puzzle for a couple of the companies in our sample. On the people side, I would say the leading players have almost established what you could call a sustainability academy in-house, right? So dedicated training programs for the different functions and the different teams to overcome that skill gap. And on the process side, it sounds simple, but it has to be done, defining clear metrics, assigning clear accountability, putting the right incentives in place, which often happens on the executive level, but not the levels below.
Yeah.
And then last but not least, it's a clear link to value. So coming back to the cost and value discussion, right? So once there is a clear link between your decarbonization strategy and corporate or business value, it's much more likely to be executed.
Excellent. Yeah, a lot of good insights there. And yeah, I think that what you mentioned, people in the end, we forget, and it's easy to think this in abstract terms, but in reality, you need people to make this happen. Mm-hmm. And if you have those incentives in place, I think, yeah, it's going to be very difficult. So translate those targets into something that people can actually act upon, and they have an incentive to change.
Exactly.
Is absolutely important. And I think all this commitment, of course, they need money to happen. So, Joan, from your perspective, do you see innovations happening in terms of how these decarbonization projects and initiatives are financed? Any new mechanism, tools that the financial community are developing or using specifically for this purpose?
So we are seeing a number of new instruments being designed in order to ensure that early stage projects can actually be enabled. So we've seen a lot of blended finance vehicles being established. So blended finance being a blend of grants, so development funds, concessional funds and commercial funds that then allow early stage development to happen with equity, but the value being that it's a single entity making the decision. So the blending happens behind the investment committee. So I think one of the biggest challenges in bringing projects to market is the length of time it takes to conclude agreements with the multiple lenders that are involved in the project. So I do think that these blended finance vehicles allow accelerated deployment of funding, early stage equity to be invested, then moving into the commercial funding as those projects progress. IDC has been involved in the project development space for a number of years, providing development capital into early stage projects, not exploration. So we did historically do exploration for ourselves. What we are looking at is an exploration vehicle, because we also find that there's inadequate capital available to support juniors in exploration. We've got listed vehicles that are available on the AIM and the Canadian exchanges, but we do think that there's a need for additional exploration funding to support particularly technology studies. I think the development in technology to support exploration and juniors in that space has improved so much that we really do need to look at how we support and enable that. With that, skills was mentioned. So I do think at COP we had quite a few conversations with philanthropies who to date have provided a lot of risk or grant funding to social initiatives. And the question was, how do we look at translating that not as grants as welfare, but grants to enable skills development to ensure that communities can be upskilled, included, trade schools developed, in order to ensure that we provide the technical skills and the the expert skills to actually unlock the opportunities and provide the social inclusion at the same time. So the conversations are evolving. New instruments are being developed, but I think a lot more needs to be done. My bugbear is very much the rating agencies' approach and requirement for risk to be managed and mitigated. So what that means, and risk is always translated into financial. The reality is early stage risk that is being taken by development organizations like ourselves are technical risks, and that being translated into into a high risk investment inhibits the ability for development finance institutions to fulfill their key roles. So I do think that DFIs need to look at how we can create separate investment vehicles that can take that risk and not be limited by what rating agencies and lenders expect DFIs to be doing from a portfolio perspective. So I really think, again, we need some different thinking as to how we can unlock risk capital and take some of the risks that DFIs were taking in the 80s and 90s.
Okay. 2 minutes. We are running out of time. Perhaps in terms of innovation, and so you mentioned there is a lot of technology out there. What do you think in the long term can help us to decarbonize, and which are perhaps the game changers that are there today that we cannot see, but tomorrow may make a difference?
I'm going to use two examples here of two commodities. I mean, we know that decarbonization is not going to happen without us doing more mining, and responsible mining, that is for sure, doing more recycling. Two elements. One is lithium. Lithium is something that we all talk about. There's a lot of lithium mining happening. Either the hard rock, the spodumene, or the brines. So on the brine side, there's some interesting technology developments. The traditional way was to have these massive evaporation ponds that took years to mature and took up a lot of space, cost a lot of money. There's technologies are being developed called direct lithium extraction. Multiple technologies emerging, and none of them yet, up at industrial scale as far as I'm concerned, but they're getting there, and there are multiple approaches. So I think that will be one that will have a significant impact on the environment, on the cost of the projects, on the energy efficiencies, and on the the speed to which we can bring lithium to the market. That's one. Second one is another major element. We've spoken about steel. Another major one is aluminium. The utopia is because inherently in the process of producing aluminium, you expel CO2. That's just greenhouse gas. That's just one inherently in the process to replace the carbon in the manufacturing process of the aluminium. There are technologies available, and we've got participating in that, where the carbon anode, for example, will be replaced. So imagine a world where we can produce aluminium without having carbon anodes, without getting CO2 in the air. So I think those are two technologies that could have a massive impact, and there are multiple others, but I can just suffice to say that they are in development as we speak. Way out technologies are also being spoken about. We need batteries that can retain energy, can save energy on a massive scale. A lot of the technologies that are available today need to be implemented on industrial scale. We've got lots of little examples, lots of prototypes, but we need to scale them up significantly in order to meet our aspirations and our demands for the future.
Thank you. To close, I know we are running out of time, but Sam, you deserve to close the session. Perhaps going back to Saudi, what are the opportunities here you can see to produce green metals in the kingdom? Is there any, in your view, which are the winning that competition?
Yeah, I'm sorry, I'm going to be a bit pessimistic. I don't think the green metal would be something that is on the agenda. Not because they don't have the potential, they do, but because they don't export a lot of it in the first place. Most of it is consumed in here. And because they're importing pellets from outside as well. The iron ore in here is not at the quality required. They do self-aluminum, but that's relatively small. But I think in terms of incentives, the kingdom may well want to decarbonize by 2060. So eventually the pressure is going to be to do actions, transitional in its forms, either in terms of the carrot or the stick. If emerging markets come, you mentioned NEOM. NEOM wanted the low carbon cement, so now there will be factories that are able to produce low carbon cement. Once that project is finished, then you do have the infrastructure at scale that others can use. So this will be an incentive to form. Also, in terms of stick, if, for example, there's a global carbon price or carbon at the gate, then Saudi Arabia has also already established an entity that can trade carbons. So there will be some activities that happen in the future that may help in the decarbonization. Synergies, I believe, is quite important. I talked about recycling before and how that can, for example, help the cement industry. The more RDF we put in here, the less heavy fuel oil or fossil fuels we need to ban. So there are these opportunities, but they're all transitional unless there's a drastic action comes from the government. But I have to know that some of the issues identified by the panelists, they're not totally relevant here. There's finance is not a problem. Decision is centralized. Community are happy to go with what the government says. It's a matter of the finances and the Saudi Arabia's standing worldwide and its commitment that actually will eventually make it happen.
All right, thank you. I don't think we have time for questions, right? No, the producer is telling me to finish here. I want to thank you all, guys. I think it's been an incredible conversation. Hopefully, people here found it interesting. I'm sure that we are all available for further conversations offline. Just thank you so much. We stay in touch. Thank you.